This is one of my favorite lessons, comic strips. Another way to think of a comic strip could be maybe a graphic novel. So this is the assignment for the week, doing comic strips. So this is the one that I did during the summertime for another video that you can find on YouTube. But the topic was COVID-19. What did you do, COVID-19? So I have my little square. I walked, I exercised, I created art, and I planted a garden. And this is a triple series panel, digging, watering, and growth. So let's get started on looking at your resources that will get you through this project. There are several. First thing I want to talk about is the panel. This is what you call a comic strip panel, and the resource I have for you is a 3-block panel sheet. Now you can turn it this way or you can turn it this way. And as you can see, I took mine and divided this even into sections. Something I want to point out to you is where it was one series of pictures, I used a dotted line instead of a solid line to break up the panels. Now there are also other panels on the internet. If you so choose, you can go and find your own that have different shapes. But feel free to draw your own blocks if you can't print this out. There's no excuse for not doing a comic just if you don't have the paper. So the other thing I want to look at is how the story flows on your panels. The story flows just like if you were reading a book. It starts on the left and moves to the right. Now when you start another line, it would still start on the left and move to the right. This is incorrect. We don't start on this side and move backwards. They do that in some other countries where they read that direction. But we are going to write just as if we were writing a sentence or a paragraph. The next thing I want to look at, and this is in your resources, is the type of conversation bubbles. If you'll go look at a newspaper or Google some different comic strips or look in your graphic novel, there are different types of conversation bubbles to represent how the person is saying what they're saying. So of course the most common is a speech bubble. Then you have the thought bubble, which is the clouded shape. And notice that the little lines at the bottom point to who's speaking. Then you have a whisper, that's a dotted line. That means it's not as loud as. Then you have telephone, which is the zigzag line. And then you have shout, which is the zigzag line all around. And then you have type. Now what that means is if somebody is typing something or not saying it, but it's an old term, but it's like if it's being typed out but not necessarily spoken out. I call them narrations, but anyway, you can Google those terms and get more information if you so choose. Now the resources available. There are several, if you Google or anything else, Pinterest, there are several different ways to draw bodies. Now, I do a lot of comic strips. I have a book at home of the ones I've completed, and I choose to use a little rectangle for a body and just keep it very simple. This is in your resources. It's showing how to create a body that's not a stick figure. We're in middle school. We want to venture away from the stick figures, and you may have to practice some on paper first. But this even has some sample gestures. A gesture is a way to show movement. It's got some simple ways to do hands. It's got some simple face features and hair features, and we really don't want to turn in stick figures. Everybody can practice. I will flip back and show you that even as your art teacher, I had to practice some to get some different movements, some different gestures. I call them thumbnails. So it's very important that you do practice that and you do not turn in stick figures. You have this resource, so I intend for you to use that. So let's say you want to just do faces that are talking, and you don't necessarily want to do movement, which that's perfectly fine. A lot of ones that are just faces can be termed editorials if it's a one-panel picture. So I have some different faces that you may practice your drawing with. And of course, you don't want to trace these, but you do want to use these as a resource, especially if you can't print things out. These are on your weekly page. I like that one a lot. Looks like a wrapper. And then you need to look at the fact that heads don't float. They are attached to a body. So this is some examples of shoulders. So you can take any of these heads and then you can do shoulders. You don't have to use these. It's just showing you how simple it is. An arc on each side, little lines down, connect it with the neck, and you're done. So you have your heads and you have how to attach those heads onto a body. Now let's move on to what you might put on these faces. I have two more resources for you. Some very simple noses that go with comics or cartooning. I also have some beards and some mustaches. Like that one. That's a mustache. It looks like an oriental kung fu type Santa Claus style. Anyway, noses and mustaches. And then I also have a lot of eyes for you to consider and several different mouths for you to consider. So let's go over the resources one more time. This is mine. You can look at my comics video on YouTube from the previous lesson that I taught, but this is your lesson for this week. So I have the eyes and the mouths. You have the nose and the mustaches or beards. You have several face samples that you can use. And then you have how to anchor those heads onto shoulders, because we don't do floating heads. And I also have a sheet for you with sample gestures, how to draw a figure, because we are not drawing stick figures anymore. So please don't turn in stick figures. Give it a try. Give it your best shot to do a non-stick figure. You also have your examples for your how someone speaks, your conversation bubbles. You also have seen, and this will be just in the video, how to transpose your graphic novel or your comic strip from left to right. And you also have your panels that you may draw if you can't print them. Here's something just to show you. Another way comic strips are laid out is using just squares. So these are your resources on the internet, on the class page. Feel free to use other resources that you can find. And this is one of my favorite projects. Now let's talk about the topic. I'll give you a choice of two things. You need to have some thought as what you're going to make your comic about. So one of the topics that you can choose from, what did you do during COVID-19? The other topic you can choose from is about virtual school. I want for you to do a comic strip about one of those two topics, COVID-19 or virtual school, and try to stick to the topic so that you don't get lost rambling off in another world. And I can't wait to see these. Make sure that I'm able to see them if you take a picture, because I can't grade something I can't see. Have fun with it, and make sure you turn these in the classroom page assignments.